I sat in the lawyer's office, still wearing the hospital wristband from visiting my father. The plastic band felt tight around my wrist, a reminder of the countless hours I'd spent by his bedside over the past 3 weeks. Mr. Harrison, the estate attorney, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Claire," he began, then paused. That's when Linda smiled, that cold, calculated smile I'd come to recognize. "The will was updated 3 days ago," Mr. Harrison announced, sliding a crisp document across his mahogany desk. My eyes scanned the dates. 3 days ago, my father was heavily sedated, barely able to recognize me when I held his hand. Linda's manicured nails drummed softly on the armrest. "Everything comes to me," she said, her voice steady and practiced. "The house, the accounts, the land." My stomach dropped. 11 years I'd cared for my father after my mother passed. 11 years of Sunday dinners, hospital visits, and late-night calls. Now, according to this paper, I was erased. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of my chair, forcing myself to breathe. Linda leaned forward, her perfume overpowering. "Your father wanted peace, dear," she whispered. The hallway outside felt suffocating. Linda caught up with me, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She pulled me into a hug for show. Mr. Harrison was still watching through his glass door. Her arms felt like a vice. "Accept your place," she hissed into my ear, her breath hot against my neck. "Fighting this will only embarrass you." She released me and stepped back, her public mask sliding perfectly into place. Her adult son Mark appeared from around the corner, a smirk playing on his lips. "You're lucky Mom's letting you take your tools from the garage, Claire," he said, crossing his arms. "Dad's old workbench stuff. That's generous, considering." The casual cruelty in his voice stung worse than I expected. Those tools were gifts I'd given my father over the years, each one chosen carefully for the projects we'd worked on together. I turned to leave, my vision blurring with unshed tears. That's when Mr. Harrison appeared beside me, his expression unreadable. He pressed a business card into my palm, his voice barely audible. "Call me if anything feels off." I drove straight back to Memorial Hospital, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The day nurse, Patricia, recognized me immediately. We'd shared many conversations during my father's stay. I found her near the nurse's station, updating charts. "Patricia, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice cracking. 3 days ago, Tuesday, do you remember my father's condition?" She glanced around, then pulled me into an empty consultation room. Her face told me everything before she spoke. "Your father was barely conscious that day," she admitted, her eyes filled with sympathy. "The morphine dosage was high because of his pain levels. He didn't recognize visitors. He kept calling me by your mother's name." My heart pounded in my chest. Could he have understood legal documents? I pressed. Patricia shook her head slowly, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Absolutely not. I documented his altered mental state in his chart." She paused, then added something that made my blood run cold. "There was another witness present that day," she said quietly. "Someone who wasn't family. A woman I'd never seen before." My childhood home looked different somehow. I pulled into the driveway, noticing the locks on the front door had been changed. The brass knobs were new, gleaming in the afternoon sun. I still had my key, but when I tried it, nothing happened. I walked around to the garage side door, my usual entry point when I'd visit. Locked. I peered through the window and my breath caught. The space where my father's old lockbox used to sit was empty. That box contained decades of memories, documents, photos of my mother. The back door suddenly opened. Linda stood there, arms crossed, blocking the entrance. "This house is mine now, Claire," she said flatly. "You're trespassing." I steadied myself against the doorframe, anger rising in my throat. "I just want some family photos," I managed. "Things that belong to my mother." Linda's expression didn't soften. "Everything here belongs to the estate. Which belongs to me. If you don't leave, I'll call the police." I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the garage one more time. The lockbox was definitely gone. Whatever was inside, whatever my father had kept safe all these years, was now in Linda's possession. The certified letter arrived 2 days later. I recognized the law firm's name immediately. Expensive, aggressive, the kind that specialized in crushing opposition. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. "Cease and desist from any attempt to contest the last will and testament," it read. The letter went on to describe me as estranged from my father, claiming I'd only appeared at the end of his life. My vision blurred with rage. Estranged? I'd been there every Sunday for 11 years. I'd driven him to doctor appointments, filled his prescriptions, sat with him through chemotherapy sessions. Linda had been in his life for barely 3 years, swooping in after my mother's death like a vulture circling prey. I walked to my desk and pulled out my phone, scrolling through years of text messages. Can you pick up my prescription? Thanks for dinner, sweetheart. Doctor says I'm doing better, because of you. Hundreds of messages, documenting our relationship, proving our bond. I took screenshots of everything, my anger transforming into determination. Linda wanted to paint me as absent, uncaring. But I had evidence. Mountains of it. The probate attorney's office smelled like old books and coffee. Marcus Webb looked exactly like his website photo. Gray hair, kind eyes, rumpled suit. He listened as I explained everything, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Contesting a will is expensive, he said finally, his tone gentle but honest. It's also difficult, especially when the document appears clean on its face. Courts generally respect a person's final wishes. My heart sank, but he held up a hand. However, he continued, leaning forward, there are grounds for challenge. Lack of testamentary capacity is one. If your father couldn't understand what he was signing, the will is invalid. He tapped his pen against his pad thoughtfully. The timing concerns me, Marcus admitted. A major change while hospitalized and heavily medicated raises red flags. Plus, the previous relationship between you and your father contradicts the estranged narrative. He studied my face carefully. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Was there ever an earlier will? Something that documented your father's previous intentions? I sat up straighter, a memory suddenly surfacing. Years ago, my father had mentioned updating his estate plan. He'd wanted everything split fairly. That night, I tore through my apartment searching old email accounts. I remembered my father sending me something. A scanned document maybe 5 or 6 years ago. He'd wanted my input on beneficiary designations, asking if I thought his plans were fair. I logged into an old email address I rarely used anymore. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I searched for keywords: estate, will, plan. Page after page of old messages scrolled past. Then suddenly there it was. Subject line: estate plan, 2017, your thoughts? My father's email address. Dated March 15, 2017. I clicked it open with shaking hands, and there, attached as a PDF, was a complete will. I downloaded it immediately, my heart racing. The document was clear. Everything split 50-50 between Linda and me. The house would go to me as it had been my childhood home. Financial accounts would be divided equally. My father had even included a note: want to be fair to everyone. I printed 3 copies immediately, handling them like precious artifacts. This was proof. Proof of his real intentions before Linda got her claws in. But as I read the footer, my hope dimmed slightly. It was labeled, draft, not executed. Marcus reviewed the 2017 will carefully, his expression thoughtful. This helps significantly, he said, but we need the original signed version. A draft shows intent, but courts prefer executed documents. I felt my shoulders sag. Linda claims my father destroyed the original, I explained. She says he changed his mind about me. Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. He made a note on his pad, then looked up at me. Who drafted this? He asked, pointing to the attorney's name at the bottom. Attorney Gordon Price, Price and Associates. I leaned forward eagerly. Is he still practicing? Marcus was already typing on his computer, searching the state bar database. A slow smile spread across his face. Very much so. And he's required to keep client files for at least 7 years. Even better, Marcus continued. Attorneys typically keep original wills in their office safes. If your father executed this in 2017, Gordon Price might still have the signed copy. Hope sparked in my chest for the first time in days. Linda hosted a family dinner at my father's house. Her house now, she kept reminding everyone. I attended because Marcus advised me to document everything, to observe Linda's behavior and statements. The gathering felt like a performance, staged for an invisible audience. She'd already started renovations. New curtains hung in the living room, expensive and gaudy. The family photos, my mother's pictures, had been removed from the mantel, replaced with Linda's tasteful abstract art. My father had been gone barely 3 weeks. "I'm thinking of adding a sunroom," Linda announced over dinner, gesturing expansively. "And the kitchen is so outdated. Marble countertops would be stunning." Her friends cooed appreciatively while I pushed food around my plate. Then Mark, her son, said something that made my fork freeze midair. "The land sale should close next month, right, Mom? The buyer's pretty eager." Linda shot him a warning look, but he continued obliviously. "That developer's paying top dollar for Dad's 40 acres. My father's land. The property he'd inherited from his parents, swearing he'd never sell it. Land that wasn't supposed to be sold until probate closed, until the estate was settled. Yet Linda had already contracted to sell it. Marcus filed our objection on a Friday afternoon. It wasn't a full contest yet, just a limited objection requesting judicial review due to timing and my father's medical condition. The motion was careful, measured, professional. It simply asked questions rather than making accusations. Linda's response arrived Monday morning, delivered by courier. Her attorney had filed a motion to dismiss, calling our objection baseless, and a transparent attempt by a disgruntled heir to overturn clear testamentary intent. The dismissive tone made my blood boil. But what caught my attention was Linda's demeanor when I saw her at the courthouse for the preliminary hearing. She'd always been composed, controlled, every hair in place. Today she wore an expensive suit and that same calculated smile. She approached me in the hallway before the hearing, her voice low and venomous. "You're wasting everyone's time," she hissed. "Your father chose me. Accept it." But something in her eyes betrayed uncertainty. The judge called us into chambers. Judge Anderson reviewed our filings silently, her expression neutral. After what felt like hours, she looked up. "I'm not dismissing anything yet," she said. "This matter requires examination." Linda's smile faltered slightly. Linda's counterattack came swiftly and brutally. She submitted affidavits from several people I barely knew, each painting me as bitter, irresponsible, absent. "The daughter only appeared when death was imminent," one stated. "She was always jealous of Linda's relationship with her father," claimed another. I read through them with Marcus, my hands shaking with rage. "This one," I said, pointing to a signature, "is from Helen Turner. She lives in Colorado. She hasn't been in town for 2 years. I know because she's my father's cousin, and she sent a sympathy card from Denver." Marcus leaned forward, suddenly alert. "You're certain about this?" I nodded emphatically. "Absolutely." She moved to be near her daughter. "I have her new address from the card she sent." Marcus's expression hardened as he made detailed notes. "False affidavits are serious," he said quietly. "If we can prove someone signed a statement claiming to witness things they couldn't have witnessed because they weren't even present, that's fraud. It undermines Linda's entire credibility." He started making calls immediately, tracking down Helen Turner's whereabouts during the relevant time periods. Within 2 days we had proof. Airline records, utility bills, rental agreements, all showing Helen was in Colorado during the months she claimed to observe my estrangement. Patricia, the hospital nurse, agreed to meet with Marcus. I waited nervously in his office while they spoke in the conference room. Through the glass, I could see Patricia gesturing, explaining, clearly emotional about what she'd witnessed. When Marcus finally emerged, his expression was grim but determined. "She's willing to testify," he said. "She documented everything in the medical records. Your father's sedation levels, his confusion, his inability to recognize people or understand questions. There's more," Marcus continued, sitting down heavily. "Patricia remembers Linda visiting your father that Tuesday. She says Linda insisted on private time with him, asked the nurses to step out. When Patricia returned, your father was agitated, trying to say something but too medicated to form words." My stomach churned. What was Linda doing to him? Marcus shook his head slowly. "Patricia doesn't know for certain, but she noted the visit in her log. What she does remember clearly is Linda coaching your father's responses when the notary arrived later." "Coaching how?" I asked. Marcus consulted his notes. "Linda would ask yes or no questions, then answer them herself before your father could respond." "You want me to handle everything, right, dear?" "Yes, of course you do." That kind of thing. The notary witnessed it all. The mystery witness turned out to be crucial. Marcus tracked down the notary through the acknowledgement on the will. Her name was Virginia Foster. A mobile notary Linda had apparently contacted specifically for this job. Marcus scheduled a deposition. Virginia arrived nervous, clutching her notary logbook. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30, clearly uncomfortable with the legal scrutiny. Marcus began gently, establishing her credentials and experience. Then he asked about March 28th, the day the will was signed. I received a call from Mrs. Linda requesting mobile notary service at Memorial Hospital, Virginia explained. She said her husband needed to sign important documents. Marcus nodded, taking notes. What time did you arrive? Virginia consulted her logbook, her finger tracing down the page. Then she frowned. According to my log, I arrived at 2:30 p.m. But the will states the signing occurred at 10 a.m. The room fell silent. Marcus leaned forward. Your logbook shows 2:30 but the will states 10 o'clock. Which is accurate? Virginia's face paled. My logbook is always accurate. I record arrival times immediately. The will's timestamp must be wrong. The preliminary hearing felt like a turning point. Judge Anderson reviewed the evidence carefully. The medical records showing sedation, Patricia's testimony about my father's confusion, Virginia's logbook discrepancy, the false affidavit from Helen Turner. Linda sat rigid in her chair, her attorney whispering urgently in her ear. The judge looked over her reading glasses at both parties, her expression severe. Undue influence, she began, is a serious allegation. Courts don't take it lightly. However, Judge Anderson continued, the timing here is extremely concerning. A man in hospice care, heavily sedated, allegedly executes a complete reversal of his estate plan, a plan that had been stable for years. Linda's attorney tried to object, but the judge held up her hand. The medical records are clear. The notary's logbook contradicts the document itself. And the affidavit from someone who wasn't even in the state raises questions about the integrity of all submitted evidence. The judge paused, letting her words sink in. I'm not making a final ruling today, Judge Anderson stated firmly. But I am concerned. Very concerned. For the first time since this nightmare began, Linda's confident mask cracked. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the table. 2 weeks later, Linda's strategy shifted. She produced medical testimony from Dr. Franklin, a physician who'd briefly treated my father years earlier. Dr. Franklin's report claimed my father was lucid and capable during the hospital stay, contradicting everything Patricia had documented. The report felt rehearsed, almost scripted. Marcus read it carefully, his jaw tightening. This doesn't match the hospital records, he said. Dr. Franklin wasn't even your father's attending physician during that admission. He had no direct knowledge of your father's condition on March 28th. Our case suddenly felt shaky. Linda's attorney presented Dr. Franklin's credentials impressively, board certifications, years of experience, expert witness testimony in dozens of cases. The implication was clear. Who would the court believe, a nurse's observations or a doctor's expert opinion? I watched Marcus work, feeling hopeless. We'd come so far, gathered so much evidence, but Linda always seemed one step ahead. Her resources were greater, her attorney more experienced, her willingness to manipulate unlimited. Maybe I should just accept defeat. Then Marcus looked up from his laptop, his eyes bright. I need one more continuance, he said urgently. We found something. The storage facility call came out of nowhere. A manager named Tom explained that Linda had rented a unit in my father's name 2 years ago but stopped paying the monthly fee after his death. Standard procedure was to auction abandoned units after 60 days of non-payment. But I thought you should know first, Claire, Tom said, since the unit was rented under your father's name and you're listed as an emergency contact from way back. I nearly dropped the phone. I'd completely forgotten my father had listed me as his emergency contact for everything. Marcus and I drove to the facility immediately. Tom led us to Unit 247, cutting the lock with bolt cutters. Inside was minimal. A few boxes, some old furniture, and there, sitting on a metal shelf, was my father's lockbox. My hands shook as I opened it with the key I'd kept on my keychain for years. Inside were documents, photos, old letters from my mother. And at the bottom, wrapped carefully in plastic, was a USB drive with a label in my father's handwriting. For emergency, watch this. Marcus and I exchanged glances. We drove back to his office in silence, the USB drive feeling heavy in my pocket. Marcus plugged the USB into his computer while I held my breath. A video file appeared, dated 6 months before my father's final hospitalization. I clicked play and suddenly my father's face filled the screen. Healthier, alert, unmistakably lucid. "If you're watching this," he began, his voice strong and clear, "something went wrong." My eyes filled with tears. He looked so alive, so present. "I'm making this video because Linda has been pressuring me to change my will." He explained everything in painful detail. Linda's subtle manipulations, her suggestions that I didn't really care about him, her insistence that she deserved everything because she'd sacrificed her life to care for him. My father's voice wavered with emotion. "I love Linda," he said, "but I know my daughter. I know the kind of person she is. Fair is fair. The 2017 will represents my true wishes. Everything's split equally. If anything happens to that will, if Linda manages to change things, please fight it." The video showed him holding up a copy of the 2017 will. "This is what I want," he stated firmly, looking directly into the camera. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Then heartbreakingly he added, "If you're watching this, something went wrong. I'm sorry. Be strong." Judge Anderson agreed to view the video in her chambers. Linda's attorney objected strenuously, calling it inadmissible hearsay, but the judge overruled him. Marcus, Linda, her attorney, and I sat in tense silence while the judge watched. I couldn't see her face, but I watched her body language. She sat straighter as my father spoke. She paused the video twice to take notes. When it ended, she sat in silence for a long moment before removing her reading glasses. Court reconvened 30 minutes later. The gallery was packed. Word had spread about the video. Judge Anderson took her seat, her expression neutral but firm. "Based on the evidence presented," she began, "I have serious concerns about the validity of the March 28 will. The video testimony, while not traditional, clearly demonstrates testamentary intent and capacity. Combined with the medical records, the notary discrepancies, and the questionable affidavits, I am ordering a full second review of the contested will. Furthermore, all estate assets are frozen effective immediately." Linda's face crumbled. She grabbed tissues from her purse, dabbing at her eyes dramatically. But I noticed the tears were for the courtroom cameras, not from genuine emotion. Her calculated performance continued even in defeat. Mark approached me in the courthouse parking garage, his usual swagger gone. He looked scared, his eyes darting around nervously. "Claire, I need to talk to you," he said quietly, "but not here. Somewhere private." We met at a coffee shop across town 2 days later. Mark looked haggard, like he hadn't slept. He ordered coffee with shaking hands, then finally spoke. "Mom promised me money," he admitted. "A lot of money. From the sale of the land, from the estate. She said I'd get my inheritance early. But now everything's frozen," he continued, his voice cracking. "And I did things she asked me to do that I shouldn't have done." My pulse quickened. "What things, Mark?" He took a deep breath. "I helped her coordinate the will change. I drove the notary to the hospital. I knew Dad was too out of it to understand what was happening, but Mom said it was fine, that he'd already agreed to everything when he was lucid." "I'll testify," Mark said suddenly, looking directly at me. "If you can protect me from legal consequences, I'll tell the truth about everything. The coaching, the rush timeline, the notary, all of it. But I need immunity." Marcus worked with the prosecutor's office to arrange Mark's immunity in exchange for his testimony. Meanwhile, emails surfaced. Emails between Linda and various parties that painted a damning picture of coordination and manipulation. Linda had emailed Gordon Price, the attorney who drafted the 2017 will, asking about retrieving the original document. When he refused without my father's direct authorization, she'd stopped responding. Then mysteriously, the original will had vanished from Gordon's office safe during a break-in that was never solved. More emails showed Linda pressuring my father's doctors for access, timing her visits to coincide with medication schedules when he'd be most confused. She'd researched hospice sedation protocols, noting when patients were least likely to have capacity. The most damning email was to the notary, Virginia, sent the night before the will signing. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. sharp. Patient will be prepared. Keep it quick and simple. Yes/no questions only. $500 bonus for your discretion. When confronted with the emails, Linda's attorney quietly filed a motion to withdraw from the case. He claimed irreconcilable differences with his client, but everyone understood. He'd realized Linda had lied to him, making him complicit in potential fraud. The courtroom was packed for the final hearing. Linda took the stand, her new attorney, her third in as many weeks, looking uncomfortable. The prosecutor began questioning her about the timeline, the emails, the coordination with Mark and the notary. Under oath, Linda's carefully constructed story began to crumble. She contradicted herself repeatedly, claiming she couldn't remember details one moment, then providing suspiciously specific recollections the next. Judge Anderson's expression grew increasingly stern. The prosecutor began, but Linda interrupted, her voice rising. He wanted me to have everything. He told me so. Judge Anderson intervened sharply. Mrs. Linda, please answer only the questions asked. The final blow came when the prosecutor presented the email about the $500 payment to Virginia. Did you pay the notary extra to rush the process and not ask questions? Linda's face flushed. She deserved compensation for. Judge Anderson held up her hand, stopping Linda mid-sentence. I've heard enough, she said quietly. The courtroom fell silent. The will dated March 28 is hereby invalidated due to lack of testamentary capacity and clear evidence of undue influence. The legal process moved swiftly after that. Gordon Price produced the original 2017 will from his office records. Apparently he'd made a copy before the break-in, storing it digitally off-site. The document was validated, authenticated, and accepted by the court. Judge Anderson's ruling was comprehensive. I received my rightful share under the 2017 will, 50% of everything including the house my mother had loved. Linda received her 50%, though the land sale was blocked permanently per my father's wishes. More importantly than the money or property, my father's true intentions were honored. His voice, captured on that video, had spoken across the boundary of death. His love for me, his fairness, his character, all of it was validated and preserved. The judge took the unusual step of reading from my father's video in her final ruling. Fair is fair, she quoted, her voice carrying through the courtroom. Those words reflect a man of integrity. This court has a duty to honor that integrity. Then Judge Anderson turned to Linda, her expression severe. Mrs. Linda, your actions have been reprehensible. I am referring this matter to the Probate Ethics Board for investigation. Additionally, you will pay all legal fees incurred by the opposing party. The Ethics Board investigation moved forward swiftly. Within weeks, charges were filed: fraud, forgery, obstruction of justice. Linda's perfect facade was dismantled piece by piece in very public proceedings that made local news. The $500 payment to Virginia became a focal point. Combined with the coordinated timing, the rushed process, and Mark's testimony about coaching my father's responses, the evidence of conspiracy was overwhelming. Linda faced potential criminal charges, not just civil penalties. Her social circle, the friends who'd attended her elaborate dinner party, quietly distanced themselves. The renovations she'd planned for the house were abandoned. The marble countertops and sunroom existed only in her imagination now. Judge Anderson ordered Linda to pay $47,000 in legal fees, Marcus's bill plus court costs. The money came from Linda's 50% of the estate, significantly reducing her inheritance. She'd gambled everything to get it all and ended up with far less than if she'd simply accepted my father's fair division. I watched Linda leave the courthouse for the final time, flanked by her new attorney. She looked at me, not with anger or defiance but with hollow defeat. The woman who'd smiled so coldly in that first lawyers' meeting was gone, replaced by someone broken. Months passed before I could bring myself to walk through my father's house again. The keys felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the front door. The locks changed back to the originals, the brass worn and familiar. Inside, everything was quiet. Honest. Linda had removed her additions, leaving the space as it had been when my father was alive. I'd asked her to take nothing that wasn't explicitly hers, and she'd complied silently. I walked through each room slowly, memories flooding back. The kitchen where my mother had taught me to bake. The living room where my father and I had watched Sunday football. The workshop in the garage where we'd built birdhouses together. This house wasn't just property to me. It was my childhood, my history, my parents' love made tangible. Linda had seen it as an asset to liquidate, but I saw it as a legacy to protect. I would never sell it, never renovate it beyond what was necessary. It would remain a home. In my father's study, I found one last letter tucked inside his favorite book. The envelope was addressed to me in his careful handwriting, sealed but never hidden. He must have left it there knowing I'd find it eventually. My father's letter was brief but powerful. His handwriting wavered slightly, written during his illness but while he was still lucid. "Dear Claire," it began, "if you're reading this, you stood firm. I'm proud of you." He wrote about integrity, about not letting others rewrite truth to suit their convenience. He apologized for not being stronger against Linda's pressure, for not protecting the 2017 will better. But mostly he thanked me for being who I was: fair, honest, persistent. "You could have walked away," he wrote. "You could have let bitterness consume you, could have fought dirty like others might. But I know you didn't. You fought clean. You fought for truth, not revenge. That's the daughter I raised." The letter ended simply: "You didn't win by destroying anyone. You won by not letting yourself be erased. That's the greatest victory. Love always, Dad." I sat in his old chair holding the letter, tears streaming down my face. Justice had been served. Truth had been restored. But more than that, my dignity had been reclaimed, not through vengeance or cruelty, but through simple, stubborn refusal to accept a lie. Linda had tried to erase me from my father's legacy. Instead, she'd inadvertently proven how strong that legacy truly was. My father's love, captured in videos and wills and letters, had outlasted her schemes. And I had honored him by fighting fair, fighting honest, fighting clean. The sun set through the study window, casting long shadows across my father's desk. I folded the letter carefully, placing it back in his book. Tomorrow I would begin the work of truly preserving this house, this history, this love. But tonight I simply sat in the quiet, feeling my father's presence, knowing he would be proud. Justice served. Truth restored. Dignity reclaimed.